In the blistering summer of 1887, the town of Dry Wells, New Mexico Territory, had forgotten the taste of mercy. 3 years without rain had turned the earth to powder, and the people to stone. Children grew thin, cattle lay down and died, and every heart kept its doors bolted against strangers. When a young rider named Elias Hart tumbled from his half-dead horse at twilight, fever glazing his eyes and ailing eyes, clutching only a child's faded rag doll, the townsfolk watched from behind shuttered windows and did not stir. Hope had become a word they no longer spoke aloud. Only one person moved. Mrs. Rosa Delgado, half Mexican, half Apache, widow, mother of a son the town had hanged 10 years earlier for a crime he never committed, walked into the street as though the heat and the stairs meant nothing. She knelt beside the stranger, lifted his sunburned head, and poured the very last of her private water between his cracked lips. "Water is dear here, mijo," she murmured, "but not dearer than a life." Then, with strength no one thought the old woman still possessed, she dragged him across the dust to her crumbling adobe on the edge of town, while the sheriff, and the saloon keeper, and every soul in Dry Wells looked on in silence. Inside the single room lit by a single candle stub, she laid Elias on her own cot and began the slow work of cheating death. A scrawny orphan boy everyone called Rat, though his real name was Tomas, watched from the doorway. Mrs. Delgado pressed a tin cup into his trembling hands. "The North Spring the rancher's poisoned. There's still a seep under the big cottonwood. Go! Bring what you can. Run fast!" Tomas, who had known only kicks and curses, ran until his lungs bled, returning again and again with cupfuls of muddy water that Mrs. Delgado boiled, cooled, and spooned into the stranger's mouth while he thrashed and called for a little sister named Lily. Days bled into nights. The town whispered that the stranger would die anyway, that Mrs. Delgado was wasting the last of everything on a ghost. Yet something shifted in the dark. One dawn a small sack of cornmeal appeared on her step. The next night, a jar of honey. Then a patched blanket, a pair of child-sized boots, a twist of coffee no one in Dry Wells could afford to part with. No notes, no names. Just offerings laid like guilty secrets and snatched away before sunrise. When the fever finally broke, Elias woke to find Mrs. Delgado asleep in a chair, her head resting on the cot's edge, her rough hand still wrapped around his. Tears cut clean trails down his dusty cheeks. He told her about the Comanche raid that took 6-year-old Lily, about riding 3 weeks on a dying horse with nothing but her rag doll to prove she was ever real. Mrs. Delgado listened, then pressed the doll back into his hands. "Then we keep you alive long enough to bring her home," she said simply. The morning Elias could stand unaided, the entire town. Miners, widows, ex-soldiers, even the sheriff, gathered in the street as though drawn by a force they could not name. Elias placed the rag doll gently on Mrs. Delgado's porch step. His voice shook but did not break. "A peddler saw a yellow-haired child called Lily near Red Bluff. I have no money, no food, no bullets, and my horse is lame. I'm asking for nothing for myself. Only for a little girl who still sleeps with this doll in her dreams." For a long moment, the wind was the only sound. Then Sheriff Caldwell, the hardest man in 3 territories, unbuckled his gun belt and let it fall. "Take my mare. She's the fastest thing left alive around here." Harlan, the saloon owner, brought a sack of jerky and beans older than sin, but still edible. A widow offered her dead husband's coat. Miners emptied pockets of cartridges and silver dollars. Children brought marbles and peppermint sticks. Even the preacher, who had not preached kindness in years, pressed a worn Bible into Elias's hand. Dry Wells gave away everything it had pretended it no longer possessed. Elias rode north at dawn carrying the town's buried heart in his saddlebags. While he was gone, something stubborn took root in the parched ground. Men who had not spoken civil words for one another in a decade met at sunrise with picks and shovels. Women hauled buckets. Children carried stones. They dug a new well in the center of town, deeper than any before, until one golden morning their blisters broke and sweet water, cold, clear, impossible water, rose singing from the earth. The first bucket was carried straight to Mrs. Delgado's door. 4 weeks later, just as the cottonwoods began to show the faintest green, Elias returned. He rode slow, leading a thin pony on which sat a tangle-haired child clutching the same rag doll, now washed and mended with careful stitches. The street filled in an instant. No one cheered. They simply opened like a gate, making a path for the brother and sister all the way to Mrs. Delgado's porch. Lily slid down, walked straight to the old woman, and climbed without fear into her lap as though she had always belonged there. Mrs. Delgado's arms closed around her, and for the first time in 10 years she wept without shame. Tomas, never again to be called Rat, stood beside them, eyes shining, while the whole town watched and felt something inside their chests unlock. That night every window in Dry Wells glowed. Lanterns that had been hidden away for years hung from every porch and post until the street looked like a river of soft gold. Someone quietly painted over the old sign, Dry Wells, POP 114. Beneath it, in smaller letters, another hand added, "Water and mercy free to all." In the middle of the fiesta no one had planned, Elias raised a tin cup brimming with cold well water. "To Rosa Delgado," he said, voice carrying in the hush, "who gave a stranger her last drop and taught a dead town how to live again." Mrs. Delgado kissed Lily's yellow hair, looked out at the faces shining in the lantern light, faces that had once turned away, and spoke the truest sentence the West had ever forgotten. "Kindness isn't weak, amigos. It's the only thing strong enough to outlast any drought." Above them 100 lanterns burned steady and unafraid, and the night wind carried their light far across the desert, the way good news finally travels when people remember who they were meant to be all along.